Hi, friends. Thank you for being here. Thanks for watching, listening. My name is Tara Long, and today I really want to talk about my traffic court case. I know this has been a long time coming. I kept saying I was going to do it, and I even did a few videos, and they just didn't feel right, which is unusual for me. I usually just one and done. And then I was, in LA for a month in January, and that was a strange experience. Like it was hard to focus and work. I felt sort of like I was, I don't know, like suspended in time and space somehow. I don't know how to explain it, but all that to say, I'm home and I'm so grateful to be home. I'm so happy to be home. Home is, for me, the very best place on earth. So, okay, let's get into it. So, there are a few different parts to what happened in my traffic case, my traffic stop. So, first, of course, I had the actual traffic stop, which I did record, and I may make that available at some point. Um, or I may, I've also been talking about doing a class on traveling versus driving. And I still may do that. I'm always available for that one-on-one. However, it's something that one really needs to feel embodied in this work and in themselves and who they are, and really have an anchoring to be able to speak to that in a situation of, getting pulled over. And sometimes it's going to, for me, of course, if you know me, everything's energy for me. So if you're in the energy of peacefulness and not anger or aggression or, hating the system or how it works and all of that. But if you're in a peaceful state and you're just, stating and claiming what and who you are, then, and actually not answering questions is a big one there. Um, then yeah, things can be peaceful, you know. But that doesn't mean, yeah, because I believe that we get reflected back to us, right, in life, what we are, like everything and everyone is a mirror, and some more than others. But for the most part, there is something is showing us something, right? Every like trigger or interaction that is uncomfortable, etc. Um, and I'm not, and of course, I always have my disclaimer. You can read down below on YouTube and on my website. I'm not ever recommending anybody do anything that I do or that I'm, talking about, right? This is sovereignty is just that. It's you are your own master, master of self, right? Master of emotions, master of and not, I mean, of course we have to feel our emotions, but you're not just being thrown around by the circumstances of your life and the wind, how the wind blows. You're actually anchored. So, yeah, all that to say, what I'm sharing with you is not advice giving, okay? And if I were to be pulled over right now, I would do things differently. Maybe not completely, but a little differently, right? If you watch a couple of videos ago, I talked about the class I'm in now, the equity class, equity jurisprudence, and so that's a different approach, and I would likely do that instead. And when you're practicing equity, you really don't need to you don't need to claim that you're traveling versus driving, right? That's not equity doesn't do that. Equity is just like um, inquiring, using questions to inquire to compel performance to get the outcome that you want from said, authority. So you're not actually making a claim. I am this. This is what's going on. This is what's happening. Oh, I'm a American national. I don't register my car because of XYZ, all of this. Like my car is in a trust. Like you're making all these claims, which I have. And this last time, it proved to be fruitful. However, it's said that equity works, like all the time. Whereas this approach that I'm talking about, that I used for my court case, you know, um, may or may not. But I really, really, really believe it's the energy you bring in. And I am going to give you examples of how I feel that worked in my case, in this court case. So first of all, I had the traffic stop, okay, and I didn't answer the questions. I just stayed very firm, very peaceful, very calm. Um, but I did, and I don't have a license plate or registration with the state. So the officer couldn't couldn't give me a citation based on that. So he used my VIN number. Okay, he used my VIN number, gave me a citation. So if you are driving, I'll just say this, if you're driving and you're not actually technically driving unless you're operating commercially, a vehicle commercially. If you're operating commercially, then you need a driver's license, right? Because you are doing business on the roads of the bigger business, right? Which is your city, county, state, country. It's all corporations. So they're doing business and you're doing business. So you need to have a license to do that. You're agreeing to that. If you have a driver's license now, you're also agreeing to their contract. You've signed a contract. You've agreed to obey the traffic laws, et cetera, et cetera. I signed my driver's license non-assumpsit, which basically is saying, okay, I have a driver's license, but I'm not agreeing to this contract in any way, shape, or form. So that could come in handy in court. You could bring that in. You could use that, and you could use equity to do it, right? By the art of inquiry, by asking questions. However, I did not. I did not use that. I did not use my driver's license at all. I used my passport because I have a national passport. I corrected my passport from United States, 14th Amendment citizen, which is the government owned citizen, to a national, American national. So I used that. And he didn't make a fuss that I didn't use my driver's license actually. But but they can, and they have. I've seen it. I've seen them pull people out of cars and stuff, So, but again, I came with very calm, peaceful energy and not fear. I mean, I was a little nervous, of course. It was the first time I was engaging with a man as an officer, having done all this work. So there were some nerves, but I wasn't afraid. I didn't have fear in my body. It was like I'm just talking to a man, but he has a gun. So you don't want to piss him off. You really don't want to piss him off, right? Um, so yeah, so basically he did give me, I didn't answer questions. He had to go and get my VIN number, and he did give me a citation, and I was cited for not coming to a complete stop, turning right on a red. He was behind me, right? And although I mean, allegedly, right? There was nothing unsafe happening, as we know. I was going, allegedly, he clocked me at going 13 miles over the speed limit. And then I also was cited for not having registration. So that was three citations. And the ticket was like almost $300. So anyway, what I did next was I sent in, I was going, this was back in August last year, and I was about to like go on a trip in like 2 days. So I, rescinded the ticket and within the 72 hours that you have in commercial law, and took it to the clerk, the clerk where, you would go for court with my documents, and again, this is all like, I'm not going to tell you every detail on this video because it's a lot. And if you want to know, you can have a one-on-one consultation with me right now, and I'll share everything that I did with you. And I'm not keeping it. It's not like I'm gatekeeping it. I'm just, that's a whole like educational thing that's happening. So that's a lot of time for me and effort to be showing someone how to do this. So anyway, this is just like basically the gist. I'm nutshelling it for you guys because I really want to um, emphasize the importance that I feel that my energy played, how important my energy was in this situation, regardless of the external physical circumstances, paperwork, whatever I did or didn't do, right? So, yeah, so I submitted some documents to the court, which again, I would do that differently now, having learned more, having learned equity actually. Um, but I did that. I submitted my documents, claiming that I am, not in the jurisdiction of of the jurisdiction, the C jurisdiction, the commercial statutory jurisdiction, because I've corrected my status, right? And other things. And I gave the ticket within the 72 hours, like I do not consent, to this contract basically. And you sign all rights reserved without prejudice above your signature, either above or to the left of your signature, because if you do it to the right or below, then you've signed before you've said all rights reserved, right, without prejudice. So above your signature, you're going to write all rights reserved without prejudice. And okay, back to the traffic stop, they do have you sign, well, if you don't sign their little digital iPad thingy, right? That states, of course, they say, oh no, you're not admitting guilt to anything. You're not saying you're guilty of having done this. It says that you understand what I just told you, which he said, you can pay it, you can go to court. He's just telling you, the officer's just telling you how you can remedy this, or just pay them money. Because that's their bread and butter, right? Um, so I said, what happens if I don't sign this? And he said, well, then I have to arrest you and take you to jail. And I kind of giggled and I said, okay. I said, on what charge? And he said, uh, he didn't know. And he had to ask his buddy. Oh, because he called some buddies in, some other dudes, cops in, to come, as soon as I was using my passport and not answering questions, of course, it becomes like a situation. And so he called some other cops in. There was a guy standing over on the right of my car too. And he's like, hey, so-and-so, what would be the charge if she doesn't sign it? And they didn't know. It's like, we don't ever have to do it. So I don't know. And I'm like, okay, maybe you should at least know your job. I don't know, um, because they don't, and I don't hold, I don't harbor ill will either for those men and women who are doing the job of a police officer or what have you, because they really don't have any idea or awareness of, what they're doing, who they're working for, what's actually going on here. So it's anyway, the young guys, that really just, I'm like, oh, I'm doing my job, right? So they didn't know. And so I said, okay, well, all right, I'll sign it. But I didn't sign it. But I signed um, under threat, duress, and coercion, right? Like I'm signing this under duress, basically. So I did that. Again, things like I would have, there are other things I would have done in that case, but it happened perfectly at the time for me and for the officers involved so that we could all learn together, right? Um, so back to doing my, trying to rescind the offer, right? The offer of the citation. But it didn't work. And I'll just tell you now, that's the second time I've attempted that in my life. And, some people say, yeah, you got 72 hours, you just rescind it, whatever. And give it to the clerk. And maybe it depends on the court and the clerk. And maybe it does work sometimes, but it hasn't worked for me. So if you want to handle your traffic citation, one way is to pay it, right? That's one way to go. If you don't want to take it further, because if you do want to remedy what has happened and bring it into honor, you are going to have to be in front of the judge. You're going to have to go to court and be in front of the judge. That's just the way of it. So I chose that. Okay, so I went to court on my court date, and the judge, I went up first and I said, yes, I'm here on special appearance, which is very important in court. You always want to be there on special appearance, not because if you don't say that, they assume you're there on general appearance and that you consent to everything that's happening. So special appearance says I don't really consent to anything that's going on here, but I'm here, I'm showing up because I'm staying in honor, right? I was asked to show up and I showed up. So there. Yes, I'm here on special appearance. And it was about a 20-minute. I did record the with the judge too, but the audio is really bad, so I can't share that. But the first time I went up, there were lots of other people in the room, and I said that, and then I was asking him questions like, does this court have jurisdiction, in the case of trust law, of a trust, because my car is in a trust, right? And he said, sit down, we'll get to you later. I got to look at your documents. Sit down, because I sent my trust document and everything. And and I wasn't really having that. So I continued to ask him the same question, and he got really mad and he's just yelled at me to sit down. So I said, okay. So I sat down. He cleared out, of course he did, everybody else, right? And everybody's doing their they were there, and they, had whatever citation they had, and he gave them the option of doing traffic court or defensive driving. Not, sorry, not traffic court, like defensive driving class. And I think 100% of people took that option. Anyway, so I cleared out the courtroom. Then he came to me because, of course, they don't want other people to hear anybody who's not just going along with the program, right? And again, this isn't about coming in and being like, oh, this judge is awful and corrupt and whatever. I mean, the system for sure is based on fraud completely, because the court, has it's a bank. The court is a bank, and so they have created bonds, multiple bonds on every single case, and so they're making money, right? That's how they do that. Um, but anyway, so he didn't want anybody to hear what I was, because he could tell I was, or whatever, I was, divergent. So anyway, so I got up there again, and again, I would do things differently now because, I would go, because if you're using equity, you have to go 100% equity. You can't be like, oh, I'm a American national and my car's in the trust. You can't be doing all these things and then use equity, and that's a whole nother story. But I was in the way of inquiring. I wasn't making any claims. I was asking questions, and I asked him lots of what I thought were good questions about jurisdiction, about, my car in a trust, about, I wanted to get in a court of record. So I kept asking him, he's asking me, how do you plead? I said, I can't, Your Honor, I'm sorry. I can't answer that because I need a court. Can you please give me a court of record? And so we went around for 20 minutes, and he threatened me with, oh, if you don't, six different agencies are going to be after you. And then he gave me what he said was a sweetheart deal of the day, that he was going to give me traffic, or defensive driving and, whatever. And he was really just trying to get me to contract, is what he was doing. That's what he's trained to do, right? Is to get me to contract, and so that they can then continue making money off of that. But I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't contract. I wouldn't answer any questions that he had for me. And I just kept saying, I want a court of record. And so finally, after 25 minutes of this, he said, okay, your date is blah, blah, blah. Or you'll, the clerk will call you with your court date. Okay, this is where it gets interesting. So I had my second court date. And then I was actually going out of town again. I had two trips, and one in like August and one in October. Anyway, so in between all this stuff, then I had my court date, after I was going to return from my trip. Well, they scheduled me original court date. She called me with a court date, and I was going to be out of town that week. So I called her back and I said, I can't. And I talked to someone else, and she rescheduled my court date for the date where I was going to be in town. So that was set. And then I certified mailed more documents directly to the judge, right? Like this was a packet of documents to the judge. And, I was going with claiming, jurisdiction. I had my affidavit. I had, all these different documents and, assumed name, certificate of assumed name, all these different things, right? So I sent that in. So when I get home and my court date's like, in a couple days, um, I go to the post office because I haven't received the green card back yet. And I was like, why didn't I get the green card back? When you certify mail something, you get the green card says, oh, they received it. Well, I never got that back. So I was like, that's weird. So I went to the post office and looked at the tracking and they said, yeah, they did receive it, but your green card must have gotten lost or something. And I'm like, maybe. And then I get a letter from this Homeland Security, Tennessee Homeland Security, and it says that I've missed my court date, and unless I pay, my license will be suspended, right? So I call the court and I'm like, I didn't miss my court date. My court date is this date. They totally messed it up. They did not put my new court date in the system. They had my old court date, so they just thought I had not. So I don't know what was just like them not wanting to deal with me, and kind of doing anything on purpose, maybe. But I have a feeling it was more the energy was moving to kind of, um, I don't know, to hinder me going to court, me, I don't know what the right word is, but to hinder the entire process, right? Because our energies, like the energy of that court system and the energy of, my energy are so completely different. They're so like we're on completely different timelines and it can't like meet, it's like hard for us to meet. That's how it felt to me. It felt like here's this court system that is totally steeped in like, fraud and dishonor, right? It's a dishonorable court and I'm not angry and there's no whatever, but that's just the way that system works. And there's me over here who operates in honor and integrity and transparently and all the things. And so it's like we just couldn't meet. So anyway, I didn't get the green card back. My court date got messed up, but we got it fixed. Then when I got to court, my actual next court date, if you are basically in a trial situation, you go first, and then all the other people wait outside until, like the traffic court people wait outside. You go first because there's a attorney, there's a prosecutor there, and you and the judge and the clerk. And you go in first and have your thing. Well, there was no prosecutor there. It was just me and all the other people. And then they shuffle us all in. And I said to one of the bailiffs, I guess, I said, I'm supposed to have my trial today, he's like, well, just sit down and, the judge will tell you what's going on. The judge was a substitute judge. It wasn't even the original judge and the judge that I sent all my paperwork to. It was a different judge. It was a substitute judge. I was like, that's interesting, right? Like all these things. It wasn't just one thing or two things. It was like all these things. So, and then the clerk saw me and she whispered to the judge and they cleared out the entire courtroom before they would get to me, right? So she got to me, this substitute judge, and she said, it was very quick. She basically, I didn't even have time to say anything or speak at all, even though I had all my like documents, I was ready to go. She was like, well, something about the officer, because if the officer doesn't show up for court, the case gets dismissed, right? He didn't show up. So, yeah, so the case got dismissed. She said he was serving his country. He had gotten called to, whatever military situation, and he was serving his country, and everyone has the right to face their accuser. And since your accuser isn't here, then the case is dismissed, and it's like it never happened. That's what she said to me. And that was it. And I was like, okay. So that I'm not claiming that, all the things that I did led to that. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I really think it was, again, the energies that just were not matched. And so it wasn't really possible, um, for that to go on. But yeah, anyway, so if I were to do it now, I would bring equity to the court because it is a more honorable way, even though what I was doing at the time felt really honorable to me. And I'm not saying that it's not. You can make a claim and it can be honorable because it's the truth, right? Everything I stated, everything I claimed was absolutely true. And I had everything backed up by documentation and the embodiment of it, right? When I was speaking to the judge, I wasn't in fear, and that really threw him, right? Because people go in there, and I saw it, all these beautiful beings, are just like, "Hi, Judge. Yeah, yep, whatever." I just, it's like that feeling of being in trouble and like, maybe going to jail, right? It's real, and I understand that. I get that. I understand that. Um, but going up there and not having that fear in my voice or in my body or in, just how I carried myself, what they don't ever see that or rarely see that. So it really kind of threw the whole court, everybody, or there was like two bailiffs and the judge and the clerk, and they were all just kind of like looking around like, what's happening? Like, what's going on, So your energy and how you go into a situation like that is to me the most important thing, right? Because if you're afraid and you have fear and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm below this, this person that's acting as a judge, then they can sense that for sure. So, and when we bring equity, we're actually, at the same level as the judge, right? Because it's justice, it's fairness, it's honor. And the judge will continue to act in dishonor until you call him or her out on it. That's just the way that the court, so, because our country's in bankruptcy, right? And has been since 1933. Our country's in a state of emergency, has been since 1933. If you read the War Powers, you can learn all about that. And that is a secret they are sworn to keep in their court. So if you start asking questions about that, well, that's part of what bringing equity is. But that, again, that's not what I did in this court case, but it did get dismissed, and I was very pleased. Um, yeah, so that's what I wanted to share. I know that was a really long video, but people have been asking me to share. Uh, if you want to go through the details and all of that, you can always schedule a one-on-one consultation with me. I'm happy to share the details of what I did, of what happened. I will be helping people, as soon as I have it and I'm ready to do it, when I finish my equity course, then I'll be helping people in that way as well. But it's really, again, it's not something that you can just have one session and be in total fear and then, oh, I'm gonna give you some process to do. You do have to go in there in a very peaceful, grounded way. Like, it doesn't mean you won't have fear. Okay, you're in a court, you're gonna have some. I definitely had, I had some nerves for sure. Um, just because you're in that situation, it's not like you're rolling up like, you know, you don't you don't care at all. You're just like, oh, whatever. You're not rolling up like that. You're just like, okay, I'm just doing this. I'm going to stay in honor. I'm going to bring this court. I'm going to bring this whole court back into honor by asking my questions. And that is what you want to do. You want to bring honor to the court, to every single man or woman in that court, and you will do it. When you are bringing equity and asking those questions, you are bringing honor into every single space. And I felt like even though I didn't do equity in this case, but I didn't make statements and I asked questions, I really felt like I was bringing that, and it's a beautiful thing. It's just beautiful. So thank you so much for listening. And if you have questions, if you want a 15-minute consult, you can go ahead and check that out below. I have my Be Free course. I have my Create Your Own Private Membership Association course. You can check those out on my website. And I'll see you soon.